effective. There is some, I will get to there, but let's just not go that much. But what am I trying to say? Take this serious because it will influence your life today and tomorrow. You may want to use it just for your project, but if you put in some effort, you'll see a lot of opportunities in it. There's one of the guys that was doing the program. He created just a Facebook page, and he has been interacting with people across the world. He has done just the basic level. And he keeps saying, when are we starting the advanced? And people are contacting him. He's posting on his Facebook page every day. Once we do an exercise in class, what he does is he go back, form some little notes about that, do some screenshots of how to run maybe the test that we did in class and upload. Now we have so many people who are signing into a Facebook page and contacting him. It's a global skill. So you can create your own opportunity, not necessarily depending on. Let's just not go that much. But what am I trying to say? Take this serious because it will influence your life today and tomorrow. If you want to use it just for your project, it's technology. So, but that is the point that we're trying to establish. So this is just one of the applications we use, SPSS. There are so many others, right? Yes. The application you use matters, but not that very much. The concepts and the application of the concepts is more important. It's more important. And so if you get the principles here, you get to when you are using Minitab, you will not take a long time to get it. Run regression in Excel and you do it in SPSS with the same data, it should give you the same results. Do we understand that? So, are we ready? Yep. Okay. Now, we have questionnaires. You know, data is collected in different forms. And one of the most common forms data is questionnaires, right? Yeah, so let's look at the questionnaire. Now somebody comment what you have noticed. Anything that you have noticed on the questionnaire. Anything you want to say about the questionnaire. We collect data using different techniques, different tools. Nish, say something. Okay, she says we're using like it still. That's what she has seen. What's another thing to say with respect to that? Now what happens is that we collect data, we can use questionnaire. We can use interview. Actually, interview guys. We can use observation. Okay, observation goes with the checklist. You're observing and checking if this thing is happening. We can, here, we can put focus group discussion. And what again? Maybe all of this constitute primary data. Primary. Then we have secondary data. Secondary data. Now, secondary data simply means data that the person using the data, is not the original collector. Means somebody collected the data, whatever purpose the person was collecting. When you want to do a thesis in University of Buea, and you decide to use GDP, the GDP of Cameroon, foreign direct investment, and all of that. The data you collect, you're not the one who collected the data, right? The data you use, you're not the one who collected the data. Somebody else collected the data, maybe the government releasing the data, this is the data. And so you just take it, that's what secondary data. So most studies that use secondary data, they've used a research design known as ex post factor design. Ex post facto simply means you are using data that you don't have control over the data. So you're actually taking data that maybe something must have acted on it, right? That economic, if you're looking at the effect of economic growth or foreign direct investment in economic growth from 1980s to 2020, that reaction must have acted. You are not influencing anything. So that's ex post facto. Are we okay? So with that, data gotten from different sources, you need to analyze. And to analyze the data, there are different techniques of analysis depending on the research questions that are indicated and the type of study. For instance, if you collect your data using interview guide, especially on structured interview, there's a tendency that you will use the content analysis, thematic analysis, and the rest. That's not our focus. So we'll not go there, right? I'm not sure. But you don't like that part. So we equally have aspects to like the questionnaire, which is our focus. So now let's assume that you're collecting your data using a questionnaire, and most of the time you have structured questionnaires. Structured means all your respondents, they respond to the same questions. They don't have room for what? Their own opinion. Another possible name would be close-ended. Close-ended questionnaire, which means you are not permitted to give your opinion. The answers are provided, you choose from the answers. And that is common for what? Quantitative analysis, because quantitative analysis is a lot of standardization. So that helps you now to be able to analyze the data and draw conclusions based on what the responses that the respondents are provided. Now, once you collect data using a questionnaire, let's assume that you had 100 questionnaires. If you look on this questionnaire, it's called each questionnaire has a number. So you don't have the same numbers on your questionnaire. Who can give us a reason for that? Why do we don't have a particular? Who can suggest why we have that? Different numbers. I have 107. What's your number? 104. We have different numbers. You can give us a reason for that. Why do we have different numbers? Avoid repetition, yes. That's one possible reason.
To be able to know how many questionnaires are there.
Yes. That can be one possible reason. I'm still looking for one.
It's like codes for the different.
Codes for the different questionnaires. Codes for the different respondents. And it's very, very important. Now, the essence of this is that in the course of inputting your data, you can make a mistake. And you will not notice this until when you want to analyze. And discover there's a mistake on the question, a mistake when you are about to do the analysis. Let's assume that we have responses and the maximum someone could have provided was 5. In the course of analyzing, you see the 10 or 7. Now you don't expect to see 7 as a response, right? So you need to go and track it. Now, how do you get it when you do not? Because you need to know which of the respondents would have provided an answer of 7. And since we're using at times, we use the data entry, as those people who do the data entry. One of the reasons you do that is that you give the questionnaire to somebody to input it for you. You don't have time to do the inputs. They want to analyze the 2 views, right? So the person should do the inputs. Now, if somebody does the inputting, I can give you this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just go, you cover your eyes. When it's 1, you just put 1. When it's 2, maybe you put 5. So if I give you the questionnaire and I just put the numbers, I will not tell you why I'm giving you the numbers there. When you bring, I pick up at random, right? Randomly, I pick up 10, maybe 5. If there's about 500 questionnaires, I can just pick up 10 at random, and I pick 1. I check all the responses. That is part of what? Data cleaning. I just say, okay, questionnaire 107. I open the data sheet. I go respond, then question 1. My answer is 1, and you have 2. Question 3 or question 2, my answer is 1. and you have 1. Okay. So that 1 that was 2 instead of 1 would have been a mistake, right? So by chance, we'll forgive. Question 3, my answer is 1 and you have 1. Okay. Question 4, my answer is 1 and you have 6. Okay. Another red flag. I continue. Question 6, my answer is 7 and you have what? 2. Question 9, my answer is 1, you have 3. I assume that there should be something wrong. But I won't conclude, right? Because this is just one that I've checked. So it can still be natural mistake. I go and pick 1, I go and pick 50 now. When I go to 50, I do the same thing. If I go to 50 and all the answers are consistent, then I check another one. They're consistent, I check, they're consistent, then you did a good job. If you check out of 10, and maybe only 2 are consistent, then the person needs to redo the job. The job was not welcome. So that's the reason why you do this for these numbers. Now, in the course of analysis, if I make a mistake, you can go back and trace which particular questionnaire has that mistake. If you did not know by, you will not know where to lay answer. Do you understand? So that's the first thing that you need to do when you bring back your instrument. It's like a security measure to help you prevent errors. And it becomes very serious with data that the findings will be applied. Applied research. You need to be meticulous. That's the first step that we have to. Now, once you have done that, the next thing is that normally you need to input this data into the system. And to input this data, you need to devise a strategy of inputting. And that's where data coding comes in. Coding simply means you assign codes to your responses so that you can input them in your system. And so what you normally do, if I was dealing with, I normally have to open maybe an Excel sheet. Now I have rows and columns. I have rows and columns, right? So each column, let's say column A, B, C, D, represents a variable. And each row represents what? An observation. Let's say respondent to 1, respondent 2, or participant 1. That's what. That's how data is presented. Each column represents a variable. Each row represents what? A respondent or an observer or an observation, right? So that's the first thing you need to. So if I were working with my Excel sheet, let me just come here and open the Excel sheet. For those who have Microsoft, you can open it. We didn't say we're doing practicals, so nobody should be sleeping. Unless you have been given visa to sleep. And I don't remember when Dr. Goodenough gave us visa to sleep. We'll do the coding together, so no more too much talking. There we go. So I usually recommend that we use the Excel to input our data, because I've discovered from experience that SPSS most often easily get corrupted. Once you get corrupted, you find it difficult to. Why is my machine misbehaving? Let me use it from there. So now what happens is that, like we said, you have your column, right? This is a column and this is a row. These are columns, A, B, C, as Excel presents it. Why we have rows, 1, 2, 3 to infinity. I've forgotten the total number that SPSS has. But, okay. It's coming. Okay. So I want to import my exercise. I want to input this questionnaire. The first thing is that we need to assign codes. And to assign codes, I will pick up, most of I use the first questionnaire to do that. Questionnaire 1, where I go for gender, we can give the value 1 for male and 2 for female. It's a categorical variable, so it doesn't really matter the order, right? So, which means if I were inputting, I give 1 for age group, which means the age range. I don't know why the person will choose 15 to 10 to 15. It means the person is dealing with a particular age group, right? Normally we can start from 0, but maybe somebody 0 or up to 5, 10 years might not be eligible to participate in this study. So age group 10 to 15, you can give the value 1, 16 to 22, 21 plus, you give the value 3 in that order. Now it's recommended, especially for hierarchical questions or questions that have an order, you give the least value to the least variable, which means for the age group, it's recommended, but it doesn't really influence your outcome unless you want to do some extra analysis that may be, but for descriptive, like frequencies, do not change the outcome. But it's recommended that most often you should put that order. That's just a recommendation. Now I go to level the school that the participant has. I will do the same, right? We have school 1, which is grade support also. I will put 1. The second one, 2. I continue. Now we get to a set of questions. We call this type of questions linked items. I'm not going to like it or whatsoever, however you call it. It depends on you. Yeah, some people, whatever you call, it's not important. We're not doing languages. We're statisticians. We talk more with figures. So this type of questions, you have to assign. Now, so they say, the following is about how systematic assessment can influence students' training outcome in secondary schools in Britain. Now, what you are expected to do is to rate on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, with strongly agree, taking on the value 5, disagree 4, neutral 3, disagree 2, and strongly agree 1. Now, what I said, pertaining to your experience, you should rate your level of agreement with what is happening as continuous assessment is. There are 2 things I need to note here. We have what we call positive worded questions and negative worded. Now, if we're looking at the level of agreement, if somebody strongly agrees with something, the person gives the value 5. If you strongly disagree, you give what? 1. But if you reverse the question, for instance, continuous assessment is a well planned. Now, identify the first mistake that is not recommended in the question. Because continuous assessment is a well planned and not given anytime a teacher feels like. Now, what happens is that questions with such verbs as and We call them double barrel questions. A double barrel question is a question that has two options hidden in a single question that your answer, you don't know which part of the question, because I may agree that it's well planned, but I don't agree with the second part. So once you are setting a question, I need to take care of that. Don't barrel question. Baron, kind of, either it's baron or baron, but a double baron question, where it gives you the room to do what? There are two options. If you take one and disagree with the other, but since you're obliged to answer, you indirectly take the other part. Do we understand? Do we get it? So avoid such questions. Yes, questions have two parts in a single question, right? Just a question that have two parts. That one is not supporting the other one, but contrary to the other part of the question. So what do? Avoid such questions where you are setting your questionnaire. I agree with the fact that it's a well planned, but I don't agree that anytime teachers feel like, so how do I, which one do I take? Do you get that? That's the first thing we identify. Now, the part of positive and negative worded questions says that if you check our instrument, now if the first one talks about a continuous assessment is a well-planned activity that teachers feel as and do at any time. The second part, let's say the question 2 now, says it is not a well-planned. You will see that the second question is direct opposite of the first one, right? The first one says it is well-planned. The second one says it's not well-planned. So the first question and the second question are the what? Opposites. If you are given 5 or strongly agree for well-planned, then you cannot give 5 again for strongly agree. That what? Not well-planned. Because the effect will be neutralized. Do we get that? So what you need to do is that you do what we call reverse coding. We'll see that in our subsequent classes. You need to do reverse coding. So you give 5 if you are dealing with agree, disagree in that order. And if the question is directly opposite what you are saying, you do what? You reverse the codes. Now you will not likely reverse them on your instrument to avoid confusion with the respondent. But when you want to, so this part, what I'm saying is for you, the analyst, but not for the respondent. You expect that if the respondent have given 5 for the first question, the person should at least give 1 for the second one. If the person gives 5, it means the person does not even understand the question and when I need to answer. Do you understand that? Okay, ask a question. Or the explanation is not clear. Okay, let's a small exercise. Let me bring up something here, my presentation. So let's go through this exercise before we come to the application. Maybe it will help us to understand better. This is an exercise that says, assume that you're a researcher who wants to conduct research and find out the extent to which Cameroonians agree with government increasing spending in 3 areas. The areas we have are ICT, education, and agriculture. So the first thing is that you need to do it to come up with an instrument, right? To be able to collect the data. And let's assume that this is our instrument. The first question, we have about 5 questions here. The first question talks about the gender. Normally, we have to always include background information. It's necessary. We need background information to understand who said what, who is talking, because the person talking can influence the outcome. So once we know the person that is talking, we can judge the validity of what the person is saying to an extent. So we take the background. The background, we have 2 questions. One is on gender, another one is on age, right? Now, question corresponding to our level of agreement or to whether we agree. Let's consider these 3 questions to represent our 3 objectives. The first objective, to what extent do Cameroonians agree that the government should increase spending on ICT? The second one is, to what extent the government or Cameroonians agree that the government should increase spending in education. And the third is, to what extent the population agrees that the government should increase spending on agriculture or in agricultural sector. Now, with these questions, you provide answers. Since the agreement, you want them to agree, right? Now, the first thing is that because we are interested in agreement, we assign our codes with the highest value to the highest level of agreement, the least value to the least level of agreement. In this case, we should disagree, right? Now, in that case, you say increase spending in ICT, strongly agree. The first one is what? Our first value. This is our first objective, talking about ICT, and we give disagree 1. Agree, we say moderately agree. Barely agree is 3. 4, pardon. Barely disagree, sorry, that stands for that correction. Barely agree, 4. Moderately agree, 5. And strongly agree, 6. Now we have 6-point Likert scale, and they are expected to increase the agreement. What I said was, let's assume that the first one talks about agreement, but the second question, instead of saying increase spending in agriculture, you reverse and say reduce spending in agriculture, right? But since your overall objective is talking about increasing spending in these areas, now the coding that you give for the second question will be different from the first one. Yes, since you said what? Decrease spending in agriculture. Instead of giving 1 for strongly disagree, you instead give 1 now to what? Strongly agree. You have to reverse the coding. Because we expect that, now we expect that somebody who is agreeing here, if you agree at this particular stage or disagree here, it's like agreeing in this. Since we're actually looking at the overall objective, is what level of agreement. Remember, this pertains to one objective, though we have decided to break them into different areas. A single objective will have maybe about 5 questions. And so all the questions are measuring one thing. They're not measuring different things. It may not be very explicit because you're seeing that increased spending in agriculture and increased spending in ICT, they are 2 different objectives, right? But let's just say it was increased spending. We have not indicated, and now we say increased spending in agriculture, increased spending in ICT, increased spending in education. So you are actually looking at what? The level of agreement with respect to increased spending. Do you understand? Now, if somebody is agreeing that you should increase spending on one thing, on something, the person indirectly is what? Disagreeing to the other part if you are if the answer is reverse. So if you take 5 for increased spending, and we take the question in the opposite wordings, and you wanted to agree, since the agreement now is not in alignment with the first question or with our overall objective, you need to reverse the coding. Is it still difficult? If you don't understand, but at least get the basic terminologies. You need to take note of reverse responses that are measuring the same thing. That's the first basic thing. In some questionnaires, some people will put R. When you see R, especially on Likert scale item, know that's what reverse coding. If you check online, you see how some people do like that. But the important thing is that what we want to illustrate in this class for today is the ability to assign code to your questionnaire so you can input them in your program. Other things will come with time, but that's the first key thing. Are we up to date? So we have said you need to prepare a code book or a code guide. A code guide simply means you need to have a sheet of paper that illustrates that 1 for me, as question 1 is concerned, is male, 2 is female, right? Or 1 can be male can be 0, and 2 and 1 is female. And as we agreed in this class, we can still put 5 and 6, right? They're just codes. They don't represent what? Real measurement. There is no way we are saying that male is better than female because we are giving them 2 and we're giving another person 0. They're just codes that represent our items. So you need to prepare what we call a code book that contains all your codes. For you to, when there is an error, you go back and check. Yes, you need to have all the codes. Yes. You can, for me, I say at times I just use the first questionnaire, right? I have a pen. I don't have a pen here. The pen. So normally I know that this is my first questionnaire 1. Please don't write on this questionnaire, I'm going to return them back. I'll say 1. I know this one stands for, I put 2. 1, I put 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So even if I throw away the rest of the questionnaires, I must keep this one. Because I can make a mistake. I'll need just this one. Because once you have input the exclusive questionnaire, even if you put away the questionnaires, you have checked and everything is okay, then this master sheet becomes the most important thing. And your code and the codes and the data that you have inputted in your Excel. The rest of the questionnaires now are not relevant. You've extracted the information from these pages of paper. You are put in a soft copy so you can continue from there. Do you get it? But until you extract information from here, you know that information you have extracted is okay. The manuals are relevant. You're not have opportunity to always through the manuals. But once we have extracted the information, the manuals might not be. If you have open-ended question, you keep the manuals, but you also extract the information from the open-ended question. Yes, if you don't input from all, how do you analyze? You have 300 questions, you have to input all of them. But you not do this way. This numbering is just for 1, right? Yes, but once you go to the take the second question, and I already know that you don't need to be looking. You already know that men is 1, right? But there are times you can forget, and so you don't know whether men was 1 or 2. Just that forgetfulness that has come in, you may do something totally different. Assume that we have more males than female, and now you reverse it. Automatically, you're giving different data. And what you are saying will not be a reflection of what you've collected, just because of a single mistake that you have done. So that's how data analysis could be. And it can be very challenging if you don't take into account some of these things. Mm-hmm.
In case of the questionnaires,
Excuse me. Sorry for that. The question. When you are dealing with open-ended questions, when you are dealing with open-ended questions, the story is different. It's different. Now that's why we said data is collected in different forms, right? If you are dealing with open-ended questions, and the questions are not many, you do what we call identifying themes, which mean key concepts. If an idea has, you ask people, what's your opinion about COVID? Now, people will give different opinions, right? Some will say it's a scam, some will say it's what it only affects the whites, and so forth and so on. There are different opinions. Now, if you are tilted towards, you need to go through a certain quantity, let's say about 20 questionnaires. If you have about 100, you have to go through 20 questionnaires and check key ideas that appear. From the key ideas, you establish the most common answers. For instance, if they say it's a scam, you note. Another person says it's white man's disease, you know. How often do we have a word scam? How often are white man's disease, and so on and so forth. Once you have extracted key ideas, you cannot decide to assign codes. It's a scam, you can give the value 1. White man's disease 2, then 3, up to a certain level. And any other opinion falls under others. So you are now converting the text-based questions to what? A standardized instrument. So you can always equally input it at that stage. Any question again with respect to that?
In fact, we have to go through all the questions.
Not necessarily all. You have to sample now. If there are 1,000 questionnaires, do you think you will go through all 1,000 questionnaires to be able to establish a pattern? You may not go through. So you do sampling, right? Take a portion. From there, you generalize. Yes.
I wanted to find that, okay, from that level, must you only convert it back now from the text-based to this approach before you input it?
How, if you don't do that, how do you input it? You cannot input it. Or you go with content-based analysis, qualitative analysis. But if you are assigning this course and inputting your SPSS, you're going towards quantitative. So that's what you have to do. So this is now a sample of a code guide or a code book. I know that my variable age doesn't have codes. Who can give us the reason? So we have said this in class multiple times. The variable age here, we have given gender is 1 for male, 2 for female. But age, let's just say age in years. They have come now to ICT, they have given 1, 2, up to 6. Why is that gender doesn't have the same pattern? Okay, she says because it's scale. Who disagrees with her?
I think that the questionnaire you gave, you showed also was the age was just blank. It was just so
that's yeah. It was open. It was open for you to fill in. So do you think that that's why we don't have the answer, the responses also? Levels of measurement. She has given the right answer. So she has given the right answer. Age is a continuous variable in this particular case. But the one you have, we have age here. The age here is not continuous. I've seen now the difference. We have answers. In fact, we have finite options. You really get that? So once you do that, let's assume that this is the data. This is how you would have inputted your data in a master sheet. You have your data at this stage. This is your data at a master level. You have to do what? Take the data now, see how you can input it. This is your master. So if I don't have this questionnaire now, there's no problem. I already have my responses here. So if this is an Excel document, you now need to import it to whatever statistical tool that you want to analyze. And we'll see how to do that. Are we okay? So, yes.
You use Excel, but to analyze it, you must come back to SPSS.
If your intention is to use SPSS to analyze now, why use? You want to live in this house, and you pack your things in that house. You need to pack those things and bring them here and put them here so that you can actually live in this house. Otherwise, you go and live in that house. So you want to analyze in SPSS, you must bring it. That's what we said. Excel is one of the statistical packages used for analysis. So are we okay up to this stage? Okay. Now the simple exercise we did, I think this is the data that was inputted. Is it the data? No. It's not the data. We all have our SPSS open, right? Okay. Okay, this is our data now. This is our data. But before we come back to this data, I'm saying this is my data and people are looking at me. These are people are accepting. Why is that a system?
No source.
Okay, no source. What's happening? I don't know why my screen stopped. I don't think I did it myself.
Showing the screen.
Yes.
Should have previous.
Okay. So, like I said, before we get back to this, our data, what we need to do is to come to SPSS now, which is our focus. Now, once you open your SPSS, it appears similar to Excel, right? Rows and columns, a spreadsheet. This type of document we call a spreadsheet. And we have data in different formats. We have rows and columns. And we earlier indicated that once
We open a new data set.
so if you're opening for the first time, you will see you need to close it. But if you open, all of us are here. We'll take a quick.
So I take a new data set.
Yes.
I also see new database file.
Don't bother. We are not doing database for now. So this is our SPSS. Once you open SPSS, the first thing you will notice that we have the data view, which is what we see here. This end, the lower end of our, and we have the variable view. Now at the top, we have the name. For me, I have untitled 2 data set. SPSS Editor. This is where when you save, this untitled is the default name that SPSS gives. Once you save with a different name, that name will change. Now, like any other application that we must have used or we have seen, we have the menu bar that has the options. We have our file. We have edit, we have view, data, transform, analyze, and many others. In this particular case, we are very much interested in data, transform, and analyze. We'll add to it graphs. Those are the key menus that are of importance or interest. However, if you click on file, file gives you some key options. One, for you to be able to open a new data set, you go to new. And so if I want to open data or a new tab, I click there. Now they've opened a new file for me. Yes, so you now see that the name here has changed because this is data set 3. So let me close it. Here's my data set 2 again now. This is my data set 2. So if you come again, you say open. Now, SPSS gives you opportunity to open existing data. And there are different data types. You have data. If you click on data, they will take you to the location where your data has been set for you to open up the data. Now, if you see, we have the name. If you know the name of the document, you can just type it here, or you click here if the document is not in an SPSS format. So you'll be obliged to do what? To take files of type. We have SPSS.ls, we have Excel, we have CSV. CSV is data, most often for programming languages, we have a CSV, and it's data separated by commas. We saw our data here in a form of rows and columns, but with CSV, the data used by commands to separate variables and their own properties. It's not of interest for us here. So we have just 2 menus that might be of interest for us here, or the file types, the SPSS default file type and the Excel, because our data will likely appear in one of these, right? Now, if you come and you don't select Excel and you're looking for an Excel file, you will not see it. Because you must go and select. So let's say I'm looking for data. Where do I have data now? Let's come here. I'll open this one. Okay. Now, if I'm SPS day 2, and if you come here, I change the file type to this, you'll not see the Excel. So you need to check, ensure that you have selected the right file type. If I put my Excel, I can click now and take open. If I take open, they'll open me the data. So what you notice here is that they will not just open the data, they will ask you some questions. And what we see here, there is a variable names from the first row. You need to check this. Now, what they're asking is, if you go to the first row of your table, most often, it always contains the names. That's the first row. But if you don't have the names, have the variables there or a participant there, then you uncheck this. So if I assume that the names of my variables are on the first row, then I take OK and I take continue. So because I accepted that variable names in the first row, they automatically give the names not to be part of my data. If I go back and I open the same data, without choosing we have to take our Excel. I come, I take OK. So now I uncheck this. Just from here, you discover that they will not open it as. So you see that they will treat the first row as what? Part of the data. But yes. So you'll be thinking that we have 11 respondents, but why we have 10? So once you take, they will treat the first row as what? the variable names, and so they will rename your data using the first row. But if you did not take that, they will treat the first row as well. And that's why you see the names of the variables now will be V1, V2, V3 in that order. So we're still here. So that's when we want to open data under the file menu. You can close your data, you can export, save all data types, you can export to different file formats. Now we have nothing to export because we don't have data on our screen. And we can export data. If you check here, the database to Excel, SV, and to there are different thousands of different files, depending on which application the data was there. If it was Excel, you see .isx, something of that nature, if it's Excel. Are we clear? Now, we have seen, we come to the edit. Edit have some view, we have can undo, we redo, we have view. If you don't, the view may want to change. If you put on click this, you discover that we now have rows and columns under view. You may not want to work with a spreadsheet, so you come under view and click that. However, all the menus will explode. So we started by saying that there are two views in Excel, in SPSS. We have the data view and the variable view. Now, let's look at the data view. The data view is where you input your data. The variable view is where you define your variables and their properties. And a variable, as we saw in one of our classes, is what? An attribute of the data or characteristic of the participant that has a tendency to vary, to take at least more than two options. That's what we indicated. So now under our variable view, we click on the variable view, we need to define our variables and their properties. And SPSS gives us some certain properties we need to define with respect to our variables. For instance, we have the name. Each variable must be given a name. We have the variable type. Excel has different variable types. SPSS has different variable types. We'll see that. We have the width, the decimal, the number of decimal places we want your data to be accorded. 1 decimal place, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on what you want. We have the label. The label gives you a complete name of your variable. Then we have values. Values, we have missing. You may have missing data. So this is where you have to treat missing data. Missing data, of course, when a respondent did not provide answer. There are different sources of missing values, not necessarily because the respondent did not provide answers. For instance, if it is by design, if I ask, do you eat rice? If your answer to question 1 is yes, go to question 10. Obviously, since the person said yes, you will not answer question 3, 2, 3, 4, up to 9, right? And so the other ones will likely occur as missing values. So you need to understand. They can be missing values because the respondent did not answer the questions. And it's always important for you to know why. Was the question sensitive? Were there certain things? Why were people running away from this particular question? They influence your analysis and your conclusion. So you need to take into account missing values. It's part of that data management process. Now, that was with respect to the missing value. However, let's get back to the name, right? The label, you actually give a complete name to your variable. You may say, what is your gender? But we'll see how it is applied. Now, the next thing we'll talk about missing values. Columns are the same like width. We have alignment. You want to align to the left, to right, center. It's not that important at this particular stage. We have measurement. Another key important part is the measurement or the measure. The measure in SPS asks you to define the variable, the measurement type. We have seen measurement types, right? We can sing them. What are they again? Nominal, ordinal, ratio, interval, right? We'll see SPS has 3, and And so we have the rule. You may want to define whether it's a target variable, an input variable, or so. At this particular point, we ignore the target and we focus on key things. So let's come back to the naming of names. Each variable, as we already indicated, must have a name, and names are vital. Yes, names are vital. If you take a variable, say gender, you may choose to just use the word gender. It's very explicit, right? But you can still put, let's say, J-E-N to represent gender. You can still assign something like that. You may say, or you may put pure one, knowing that gender stands for question one, right? You know question one stands for gender, so you put pure one. Now, things to note with respect to naming in SPSS. One, you cannot start with a figure. If you want to say maybe 9 gender, and you take enter, SPSS will bring you an error message. And here they say, variable name contains an illegal first character. So you cannot use a figure. You cannot put space. For instance, I put gender of respondent or representative whatsoever. If I take enter, it will still give me the same message. Now they say variable name contains what? An illegal character. Do not give space. Keys to note as names are concerned in SPSS. Now, another thing is we may want to put a sign like this. There's some signs that will not go. We call it the number sign, whatsoever you call that one. They'll still give you the same information. So you can check your keyboard, which are those signs that those, if I put percentage, I'm also think it's one of the things that SPSS will refuse. But we can use gender, and we use a hyphen or underscore, right? Of participants. I think it should go. They'll accept. We can equally use gender dot of dot, and it will equally go, right? But I'm sure you cannot end with a dot. SPSS will refuse. You cannot end the name of a variable with a dot. Are we okay? Now, that's what we have said with respect to the names. Now, the next thing is the variable type. I mean, the variable type in SPSS. SPSS has different variable types. We have numeric, comma, dot, scientific notation, date, dollar, custom currency, string, and most of others. But we are very much interested in 2. And actually, for quantitative studies, we use 1. Or use the numeric. By default, when you check, immediately I give the name of the variable. What SPS does is that it automatically aligns some of the attributes. I put gender of respondent and immediately says the variable type is numeric. The width is 8. The decimals, they put it 2 decimal places. They allow the label empty, values empty, missing, none, columns that the left align. For measurement, they say unknown. And for rule, they put inputs. That's by automatically they assign. Now, if you come back to the numeric, the variable type, we have numeric because we're dealing with quantitative analysis. If you take, there are only 2 that we are very much interested in, string or quantitative. String is when you are dealing with text. And the truth is that SPS was not designed for managing string data. It's mainly, it does, but that is not its primary. Primary is quantitative. So that's why even by default, they give you a variable type to what? Numeric. If you put your variable type string, you cannot do calculations, manipulations. And so many things, you will not be able to do a lot of things. So you must always go with numeric. Are we okay? Then for the default, the width is not rather important. You want to have the length of your output and the rest. Don't really matter. Decimals, 2 decimal places. You may say gender. We don't have half a person, so they should put gender to 1 decimal, 0 decimal place. Because we know that we don't have 1/4 a person whatsoever, right? Yes. But if it was age, you may say we have room for 5 years, 6 months. And so you put decimal places. The label. Now the label has no rules, but it still it's similar to names. This is where you may actually decide to put your question. Complete question, maybe say gender of participant. So there are no rules here. It can be capital letter, it can be mixed, can be whatsoever. Not really cares. Are we okay to this point? So you must understand. Now the next is values. Values is important. This is where we actually make use of the codes that we did assign, right? And we'll say in this class categorically that we only use values when we're dealing with what quantity categorical variables. I think that would be a fair conclusion. Will it be fair? We don't know. So let's go to values. We click on that values. You see 2 dots means anytime you see 2 dots when I deal with a program, most often when you see this type of dots or a small loop in, it means there are there are options on them. So you click there. Now this is where you can now assign. You say value. I take 1. And my first question, I look at it. Question 1, male. I had the value 1 for male. You take at. I have the value 2. Or my keyboard is saying that I should use by 3, so I put 3 for female. I take at. Now, there are times you may want to treat missing values when you are inputting. So some people, what they do is that you put 9 and they put either NA, not applicable, they put non-response, and so on and so forth. If you want to define your missing value when you are inputting. Some persons may ignore and don't define. So you just take at, and then you have defined the values for that variable. Ask Madam Patient. So we'll come back to missing values in a later time. We don't have data, so we cannot treat missing values. So we have columns and alignment. We go to measurement. We earlier said in this class, SPSS has those 3 levels of measurement: the ordinal, the nominal, and the scale. So which one should we choose for a particular variable that we're dealing with? So we say gender is nominal, we take nominal. So I'm sure that's all. We have defined our first variable, which is gender, and its attributes or properties under the variable view. Any question? Simple exercise. Take the second variable, input it, define its properties. 3-minute exercise. Ask your neighbor to tell you what I said.
No, I have done that. Alignment double.
No, it's not about them. Subsequently, not 2% is the same machine. That's it. Why then? Where all the rest? Okay. Well, try to finish up the man who's on the lead. Are we done? We have less than 8 minutes to go. You've done the first one. You said do just one, just each. I check. Those are done. Nada. Asha. Why you not for them showing up? Are we done? Sharp. No, okay. Sign as it's no, it's okay. We just because immediately you think by mistake, so the one to put another. No, I know where you have a problem. No, I know you need to be there. I know where you have a problem. But now I don't expect. But to name. And just always delegate. So what's the problem? Show me your screen. Let me see. I can't see. Okay. You feel that you're not okay. But you're not define your measurement. I assume we're okay. So now, if you are not with us, if you are not with, I go now with age. Now in SPSS, the name is not, is it character case sensitive? I don't think so. It can be a combination of capital letters, small letters. This, okay. Now, if you come to the second, I put this one, let's test it together and see. I hope SPS not shut on us. What happened? Let me write it again. So people tell me where the problem is. So understand where the problem is. Pardon. This is the name. When I take enter, I receive a message, very serious message. Why? It exists already. So it's not case sensitive for you see. So it doesn't differentiate. If you write one with uppercase and small, and the other one with lowercase, they'll treat them as the same variable. In other programs, that might not, uppercase is different. You can put big A and small a, and but here, that's not what happens. Okay. So for the name, you cannot have two variables that become the same name in the same start. That's what I actually saying. You cannot have two variables that have the same exact names. It must be different. So having done that, we now have to input all our, define all our variables right to the last. Q2. No, before the next class, I'm sure the data set will be provided. I will use since we are at the end of the class. So we have here 2, here 3, just continue. So what will happen if I take enter? Just is a number, so they will not accept. So that is a variable view. Under the variable view, we define our variables and their properties. Under the variable view, each column carries an attribute of the variable, but each row carries what? A different variable. Have we noticed that? Was not understood what we said. Under the variable view, each column carries a property or attribute of the variable, but each row carries what? Just a single variable and its properties. So we now have the data view. Now, once you input your variables and you define their variables here, their names are transferred to the variable view. I mean to the data view. Our first variable is yes. Once you input the come back, you have it here. So if I wanted to input my data now using Excel or SPSS as our data set, I'll come, I pick my first question. I come now, I know I'm dealing with gender, right? I put 1 for my own response. See, I go to question 2 and I put 1 again. Question 3. I put 3, question 4, maybe I put 5 as my answers. Those are answers with respect to one questionnaire. I do like that till I get to the last variable or to the last question. Right? Yes, ma'am. Once we have defined your variables in the variable view, we are just trying to define our variables in the variable view, but our data is inputted in the data view. Right? So now we just come out and put in the numbers. Yes, you put the numbers that represent the responses on the data view. For instance, if my question 5 was about age and the person was 35 years, I come here and I put my 35 or 20, 35. Why is my keyboard refusing to work? How do you put 35 instead of the number? 35 is a number, right? No, it's my keyboard that is giving, well can be CB. We're under the variable view, data view, not variable view. Yes, this person told me that it's a he, and he's 43 years old. That's what the person is from my responses, the person's information. Are you? Yes, the person's age was 45. It was not in a range. Yes, I'm just saying that if the person gave the exact age, you will not put a range. You use the exact age. Now you apply the range. Are we okay?
If we try to apply the range in the
variable view?
yes.
No. In the data view or variable view? Which are the views? Variable view.
Now, can we assign the value, maybe an example, age group? We assign the value.
The age group, we go to the age group. Let's assume that this is our age group and come to values here. And now I know that 1 was for 20. Okay, let's say 10. We can use maybe 15. Yes. When I come now to my data view, and that person was between 10 to 15 years, I'll put 1. Instead of 10 to 15, I'll put 1. Now that 1 represents 10 to 15. Now, once you do that, you may want to check and see the values themselves. So you click here. So we have a male here. If I click here, we'll see the actual values, the codes. This A and 1, you can change between values and their labels. So actually, what we are doing under the variable values here, we are putting what? Values and their labels. We have the values and label. So you may want to check the values and their label. Come to the data view and you click here. You see that 1. If you want to know, 1 is for male. So you click and you see male. We have come to the end of our class, given that my time is finished. I'm fast. Okay. Yes.
We have defined our now we are important for business. We need to still improve these things.
Madam, my time is finished.
But from the one side,
my time is finished. Okay, let me just, I do not want to go there because our time is finished. Now we said we are doing this, we're inputting it. What if we're importing data from a different system? How are we going to do that? Who can suggest?
Okay, if the data is already
imported in Excel.
And we want to bring it in.
Yes. What do we do? Follow for Mambo. Somebody give the right answer. Since I go and bring one Mambo. Export. Now ask your question to the hearing of the whole class. We want to import the data. Yeah, we know that we're importing the data, but she has a question that is different from it. Ask your question, madam. They're listening. Somebody wants to eat that Mambo. Are you getting, sir? Though you are talking, so I don't expect that she will be getting. She's talking.
She's giving the answer.
Asking it. She wants to ask the question that what is Mambo, so be listening so you can answer.
What we just did here is like inputting from this question. But I said if we have done the input of this in the Excel sheet, importing it now to SPSS, is there still for this male one, female two?
How's the answer to the question? So what do we do? Big term. What do you mean by transform? You can use that. Come and use my machine. That is.
No.
Okay. It's a good question. Now you also need to define. SPS will not be able to define for you, automatically, but it will receive the data. Now, for continuous data, we don't have an issue, right? But categorical data, if you don't define it, you can still analyze it without the normal definition. For instance, if you administer your data using a Google form, now, most of the time, the responses will be in the form of, if somebody says strongly agree, you have the strongly agree, will not be 5. Yes. So once you export the data, say from, well, not forcing me to go where I've not planned. It's probably when my time is finished. Just give me some few seconds. Let me see if I can have the data for us. Who is very tired and wants to go? Yourself. Then why did you ask a question when you were tired? You know, some of us we used to sit behind. When we pray that the class will get finished, we try as much as possible to ensure nobody asks a question. So let's take, for instance, I just open this. I have a Google form here. Google form. Can I locate it? Okay. So this is our Google form. So normally this is our data here. And this is information at the time, the email, what's your name, indicate. Maybe some people should see their names here. All right? This is still data in a different format. So let's assume that we want to take this data to SPSS. Let me just close it. We come to SPSS. Okay. We come to SPSS. Where's my SPSS? Too much applications open. Not good. I come to data. I take data. I go to specific location. That should be under download. I'm looking for an Excel file. Come here. And I see that this is the Excel file. I take OK. Appears to be empty. Why? Why are they empty? Action. Because SPSS doesn't want to help to allow us solve that problem. Let me take a different one. If it doesn't go now, we'll go in. Not answer your question. So next class. All data sheets in Excel appear to be empty. Well, let me just explain. We don't want to upload that particular data file. I don't know why. So if you're importing, the data you import will not have these codes. It might not have these values. It will come, if it was 2, you have a 2, right? In words. So what you normally do before you even bring the data here, for those that are maybe text-based responses, you have to transform them into figures in the Excel sheet before you import. Now, once you import, you still need to come back to your variable, the values, and define what one stands for. 2 stands for this, 3 stands for that, for your categorical variables. But for the continuous variable, you don't have to do anything. So that's what I needed to show, but the page have refused to open. So that's how you treat the data. You must understand that at times it's important for you to transform the data in your SPS and your Excel file before you bring it to import it to SPSS. Not that you cannot do it in X. For instance, if you wanted to do it, you can still have find and replace. This should be find and replace. You find the variable and you replace it maybe with a different name, and so things of that nature is still possible. Are we okay? Who's angry? Should we give him mambo? That asks the question on that because it's like nobody answered. Nobody's answering. Give him mambo for. When you ask questions, we should not only appreciate people for responding, right? We also appreciate for doing what? Asking questions. Because a question can take us to something that we won't have talked.
So how do you
the whole data? Variable view. You just click on it. Let me know you destroy mine. This is my variable view. I have a variable here. And these are my variables. Madam, overdue. You can just want to clear a particular variable, you click on it, you see clear. Delete it. If you are doing the entire variable. I have no question.
Yeah.
Okay, because the league wants to speak.
It's English to do with around what do you think we can do as a class against to establish the family? Posting that really powerful.
The mean should answer.
Is it a registered student? Because after that 1 or 2 class, she might change her mind, maybe to the next
The assistant course delegate, Madam, what's the name again? Madam Valence or something like that. What's her name? Let me check. But you need to have a list of those who have registered now. So which means let's assume that she's registered. If we verify and she's not registered, we'll know how to deal with the matter because she's raising a point. So let's assume that she's registered. What should we do? If she's not registered, what should we do? Right? So we take the 2 options into account. And those who are coming, if you have not had the booklet, you request for it. If you have registered, I think today is the latest day for registration.
I'm okay with the 1,000. It's still electronic. Always just speak on the person. Because if I change the one, this thing has if she's registered 1,000 and I support the 1,000.
Okay, so in which case, we say we're waiting for. But yes, let's say we're waiting for, but I think before that time, we could send a condolence message to her to assign somebody, the all rest of me. Assign somebody to send her a condolence message on behalf of her and a call. And surely that person will have to report to me when that is done, once again, the boss bestowed upon me, was I tell her to get a number, send her a condolence message and copy me, and call her to be in the class. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Before we come from, that is leadership. Leadership means taking responsibility, right? He has the capacity and we have given him. So let's support him to do his job and do it well. Just be working. It's continuous, it's progressive. That's been quite interesting. So we've come to the end of the class. Madam, are you done, madam? You're sitting down. Change your position. You need to give report. Now that you're sitting, you don't have a report to give. So our class starts next week, right? We're done for this week. Sundays, Mondays, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. You come late. For those who came today, you pay mambo. After 3:15, we don't negotiate that. No, the number of mambos is all the students in class plus the administrators. Each person is entitled to a mambo. So that's how the burden is. So you need to be on time. We equally have the weekly assignments and weekly discussions. Let's assume that the first week was a week of grace and that people were quiet and we never penalized. I'm sure this week we really need to beat up, especially for students. I hope you understand what I mean, especially for students. If you have not registered, you do so that you should become a bona fide student, ready to dance to the rules, and ready to hold the instructors and administrators to do their job that they have promised to do. You have your right, and that right should not be taken away from you by any person, right?